Everyone. I just want to thank Annie for inviting me to present to you all today. I'm very excited to be able to connect in this format. I will tell you a little bit about myself. I am based out of Toronto, Canada. I am currently a retail consultant with over 25 years of experience working within the industry itself, initially as a buyer and product developer, and then later in my career as running buying teams and merchandising teams. My experience ranges from working with all sorts of different sized retailers, from small independents to mid and large size retailers here in the Canadian landscape. And I've also covered off a wide range of different types of categories, different types of retailers that I've worked together with, for instance, in the fashion industry, as well as home and lifestyle, baby and kids, health and wellness and beauty. So my career has covered up a wide range of different types of product groups. And most recently, I've been consulting with Powered by People. For the past 2 years, I've been helping them develop their dropship program, which has connected approximately 20 makers on the platform via the dropship program with North American buyers such as West Elm, Pottery Barn, Lulu in Georgia, the Citizenry, and that continues to grow. So very exciting program that many of you will have access to at some point, hopefully along your business journey. So this presentation really is from a global buying perspective, and I understand that many of you are at different levels in your business development, but hopefully this will give you some insight into what things look like on a global perspective, and help guide you in some way on your journey. So, a buyer's mindset, tapping into our brains. So have you ever wondered how a buyer makes decisions that they do with thousands of brands and beautiful items that are out there? It might seem like such a daunting task. And where does a buyer start? So a buyer's decision will differ depending on the profile of retail organization they work for and how this retail organization is positioned in the marketplace. And so there's really 5 top factors that define this framework, and that is the size of the organization, the type of the organization, whether or not the retailer does their own private label branding versus non-private label branding, what their product classifications are, the different types of categories that they purchase, as well as their overall brand identity. So I'll break this all down for you. So starting with size. So a large versus medium versus small retail organization will dictate sales volume as well as lead time that a buyer is working with. So for instance, if a buyer is purchasing for a large size organization that has 100 plus locations, they need to work with the supply chain of makers and producers that can satisfy this type of demand. In contrast, buyers for small independent stores and boutiques have the opportunity to purchase small batch goods, handmade or slow-made products. And then a medium-sized retailer has the flexibility to do both. So for example, brands such as, or retailers such as West Elm or Lulu in Georgia, when you walk into their retail stores, you will find many items, massive collection that are developed in-house with the West Elm or Lulu in Georgia brand name. But they also have the opportunity to bring other brands into the fold and feature together with their collections. The next factor is type of retailer. So what I mean by this is whether or not the retailer is a luxury retailer versus mid-tier versus mass. And this really dictates the retailer's pricing architecture, high, medium, or low, as well as the quality of products that a buyer will need to purchase or develop to sit within this environment. So luxury, of course, focuses on exceptional quality goods at high price points. Mass focuses on lower quality goods at lower price points, and mid-tier lands somewhere in between. The third factor that, again, narrows down the funnel in terms of how a buyer selects products to purchase or develop is product classification. So most retailers, both large and small, typically set what is known as a product hierarchy to follow. And these hierarchies are made up of categories that dictate the range of products to focus on purchasing or developing. So a large or mid-sized retailer, they typically have buying teams to cover off a variety of different categories that are split out amongst many different buyers, like, for example, a department store. There's many, many different classifications, and so different buyers will focus in on different areas of business. Buying for an independent boutique is often done by the owner themselves or a very small team who buy all categories. And so basically, knowing your categories of concentration narrows down the field of trade shows to attend, which marketplaces to visit, and what types of makers that you're going to engage with. The next factor is whether or not a retailer is private label versus non. So private label versus branded versus sometimes a combination of both will dictate how you source and develop your goods. So private label products are either designed in-house or designed in partnership with makers and producers, but they are branded with the retailer's name. They require longer lead times for development, testing, packaging requirements. Alternatively, different type of retailer may carry items that exist in the market already under other people's brand names. And these can be sourced from trade shows or online marketplaces. And they often require less lead time because brands often have inventory that is ready for purchase. So I've just given some examples here on the right-hand side. Smythe is a fashion house, a fashion brand here in Canada. They develop everything in-house and work with textile producers to create their beautiful line of fashions. When you walk into a Smythe store, you will only see Smythe branded goods, which differs from other retailers like I've used Design Within Reach for an example. It's home and lifestyle. So they only carry branded products. And then I've given the example of Good Neighbor, which is a little boutique that's just around the corner from where I live. They only have 3 retail stores, but they drive enough volume that they actually create their own branded goods. This candle on the right-hand side is labeled with Good Neighbor, and this sits amongst the variety of other brands that they carry within their stores. And lastly, the last factor that helps a buyer define what it is that they're going to purchase or develop for the retail organization that they work for is the overall brand identity of this retail organization. So the look and feel of a retail or online store is intentional. For mid to large size retailers, there are design and marketing teams that craft this experience. And then buyers use this as a guideline to source and develop product that fits within that ethos. And similarly, a small independent boutique owner may do this on a smaller scale. An example on the right you can see that everything within this landscape is intentional, down to how the store was designed, the look and feel that it evokes, the type of fixturing that was used, and then layered on top of that, all of the products that were either purchased or developed to sell within this framework. So, in summary, these 5 factors define a retailer's positioning in the marketplace and gives the buyer the framework to make appropriate decisions on what types of products to buy, as well as how much. I don't know if you wanted to stop here, Annie.
Yeah, taking a quick pause to welcome in some new attendees, and just invite anyone who might have a question at this point to type in with a question and or unmute yourself, and feel free to ask any clarifying questions you might have. Thank you for defining private label, by the way, Anka, because I know that that can be confusing. So often when we are coordinating with makers on product development, we'll ask if they can white label, which is part of the private label process. So yeah, so when a retailer is looking to sell under their own brand, what you as a maker will often be asked is, do you white label? Can you work inside of a private label framework?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that, each one of these segments can have a webinar unto itself.
Yes.
Very scratching the surface here.
And for those who just joined, just a quick note that if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. And otherwise, we will hold for Q&A at the end of this presentation. All right, I think let's keep going, Anka. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So, once the first part is established and a buyer knows the profile of the type of retail organization that they are purchasing for, or they're running their own business and they have that clearly defined, the next step is putting together, getting started with buying. How do you fill your store? Where do you get started? So there are 4 key steps, which are to create a buy plan, design conceptualization, going to market, as well as developing a merchandising calendar. So a buy plan really, or otherwise known as a budget or your open to buy, is an inventory management strategy that helps retailers understand how many products they need to buy. And it's based on the relationship between sales and inventory. So a lot of in-depth analysis goes into reviewing sales history in order to be able to forecast new inventory that you want to purchase. And sophisticated open to buy plans actually split things out for a retailer with core inventory versus seasonal inventory. And core inventory are year-round items that a retailer would stock. So they never go out of stock. They're seasonless. They are typically top sellers, and they really drive sales within an organization. So buyers always want to make sure that they have their core items well planned for, versus seasonal inventory sort of flows in and out. So it might be something that is only relevant in spring and summertime, or a holiday, or fall, or helps tell a story that a retailer is trying to convey on their shop floor for a particular period of time, and then it goes away. The next step is design inspiration. So this process can range from being very simple to very comprehensive, depending on the size of the retailer. So a small independent retailer may have a specific look and feel that dictates what types of trends they follow, whereas a mid to large size retailer, they have in-house design teams that create seasonal and yearly design passes. And these define what the color story for the season is going to be, as well as they give design and material inspiration. And what this does is it really allows the product development team and the buying and sourcing teams to go out there and bring back products that really create a cohesive collection that sit well together in store. And so on the right-hand side, I've given you an example of what is called a mood board of one of the retailers that I've worked with over the past 2 years. This is just a little snapshot of one piece of their design pass. And what it does is the first part sort of evokes a feeling and a mood of what types of products and feeling they would like to create in store. And then the next part is actually pulling together the palette direction as well as the raw materials. It's very specific in terms of, it's not, they don't say copper. They don't want copper, they want dull copper. Designers can be very, very, it's very, very detail oriented. And so this allows, as I said, product developers, buyers to go to market, which is the next step in the process. Going to market. So once you're armed with your budget, as well as your design inspiration, this determines which trade shows a buyer will decide to attend or which marketplace platforms they will review. And mid to large size retailers will also use sourcing agents, and they send off their design passes or visit with them directly. And this allows them to broaden their reach to access specific makers, specifically or particularly when they're looking to develop their own private label goods. Small independent retailers may buy at trade shows, but most mid to large size retailers will first gather all of the information, order in samples for review, merchandise them together. So it's a very lengthy process of gathering everything in, and many mid to large size retailers actually have showrooms within their retail organizations where they merchandise every single piece before making purchasing decisions. And then once all of the purchasing decisions are made based on all of those factors, retailers typically set a merchandising calendar. So this allows, it's a great organizational tool for buyers to plan out their buys because it dictates the timing of when to bring in what type of goods, and how many times a retailer would like to refresh their setup in store. And these refreshes vary by retailer, but typically most retailers update with new items and displays on a seasonal basis. So spring, summer, fall, holiday, if you will. For mid and large sized retailers, this would also tie into their marketing campaigns and how they want to highlight stories, differentiate themselves from other retailers, showcase the beautiful products that they've spent all year sourcing and developing. And so in summary, putting all 4 steps into actions. So creating a budget, design point of view, a sourcing plan, as well as merchandising and marketing calendar should lead to success in buying. So actually, Annie, maybe are there any questions?
Yes. And Anka, we do have a few write-in questions. And I also just wanted to thank you for talking about go-to-market and just sort of the sampling process, because I think it's important to mention that that go-to-market period is time-bound. And so when a buyer is requesting samples, they're looking to review those samples within a certain period of time based on the season for which they're buying. And I know that that's sort of a question that's come up probably from some of you guys on this call, but just sort of thinking through the seasons of when a buyer is purchasing is important. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more, but just, you know, maybe you could further explain the seasons of purchasing. I mean, you've sort of done that already, but.
So yes, so depending on the size of retail organization that you're buying for will dictate how close to in season you'll be purchasing products for. So if I'm a small independent, you know, trade shows follow a certain calendar. And, you know, typically trade shows are in January, February, as well as, you know, August,
Okay.
September. If I'm a small independent and I'm buying for holiday, I might purchase that at an August show because I know that, you know, I won't be bringing in inventory for the next couple of months. I can pull the trigger quickly. I have a budget that's earmarked for that time period. If I'm a large retail organization, I'm actually working a full year, at least a full year in advance in order to be able to go through all of the steps in terms of, you know, bringing in product, sometimes developing product, merchandising it, making sure that everything sits well together, is priced properly, and matches the lead time. Yeah, so it really varies.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And if you are a maker, I just sort of want to, and this again might be extremely redundant for most of you, but just as a kind of clarification, if you are showcasing your newest collection, let's say at a January or February trade show, whether that's an international trade show or maybe a local trade show, you are showing your collection of essentially of samples, and you're taking orders on those pieces. And then the reason that buyers are buying early in the year for, let's say, a spring summer launch is to give you that runway to produce your products. So I'm just sort of kind of reframing from kind of the maker standpoint. And that's
Absolutely.
a very, very high level explanation, and there's a lot of detail in there, but the reason that sort of these trade shows are situated at these two breaks in the year, so sort of beginning of the year and 6 months into the year, is because buyers are factoring in the lead time for the production of the styles that they're purchasing. So just, I know that also comes up often amongst makers, is sort of how much time do they have to actually manufacture the pieces that they're creating. And that's a negotiation that you as a maker can have with your buyer, especially if you're working with a small retailer. Okay, enough editorializing on my end. I would love to open this up to all of you guys, and I'm going to start by reading these two questions, one from Fabiana and one from Rihanna. And actually, if either of you would like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask this directly. But so Fabiana writes, if a maker is not sure whether to go for white label, what are the pros and cons? Will we lose our brand identity?
So I think that white label is a fantastic opportunity. If you are working with a retailer who is closely aligned with your brand ethos. So for instance, Powered by People works together with a retailer by the name of the Citizenry. And the Citizenry, they often like to white label products, and within white labeling, they will make slight changes and tweaks to make the product slightly different from what you might offer in your regular line, whether it be, you know, changing the color or tweaking the size of it, that sort of thing. so that it becomes unique in the market. A customer can't find this particular item anywhere else because they've put their own personal stamp on an item. And so in that sense, it takes, you know, your beautiful creation and adds a twist to it, and is housed within a retail environment that is most likely very conducive to supporting your brand, if that makes sense. I don't think many retail organizations will white label things that are exactly the same as what you currently have in your collection. Most retailers will want to change it up a little bit, whether it's to match their color story or what have you. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think, okay.
Okay, great.
They're saying yes.
Great.
Okay, so Ria Anna writes, should we as designers be adjusting our core collections based on the retailer, or are these the brand defined bestsellers evergreen collections? Ria Anna, if you want to unmute yourself and also maybe elaborate a little bit more.
Hi, Annie. Hi, Anka.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call. It's really interesting. So my question is about the core collections, and this is mainly like a geographic question, you could say. So for example, we're currently shipping to retailers in New York, and we're also shipping to retailers in like Portugal, which have very different climates. Being a Kenyan fashion label, and what we're able to create is mainly resort and spring summer, but of course there are some winter appropriate things. And we do have, you know, bestsellers across the board, but then some of these bestsellers are more suitable for those tropical climates or for those wintry urban climates. And so, yeah, my question is just, should we be thinking about adjusting and making an appropriate core collection selection for retailers based on where they are, or does that just remain steady across the board regardless of where the retailers sit?
So these retailers are bringing in your collection that is branded under your name.
Yes, correct.
Okay, then I would be very mindful of where it is that you're driving sales. So, you know, if these cold weather climates are driving a lot of sales for you, then I would try to incorporate that into your core collection, because it's very productive inventory for you, and you know that you have a guaranteed buyer for it. But if it's not, then I would continue to focus on what are the two true drivers within your collection that make sense for your business and driving your business.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think for us, we have quite a few evergreen styles, and so often I don't want to overwhelm the buyer, so I had to ask. But yeah, I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and we have another question from Fabiana. For a small brand which is going to the first trade show, which fair do you suggest? And Fabiana, is this for an international trade show or local trade shows?
Yeah, hi.
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 Yeah, we are based in Kenya, so yeah, I think it will be for international trade show, but we are not sure. Being a small brand, we are really not sure if it's good for us to go to a trade show, or if there are trade shows that are really dedicated for niche brand. So the potential buyer, they won't ask thousands of pieces in probably 1 month. Yeah, so this is
Yeah, the question, like we we've been considering a few trade shows actually.
Like Ambiente or
Ambiente or
Maison
Maison
Objet.
Objet, that
Mm.
they have a small section for ethnic designs and like that. We've been brainstorming even with Wambui, right? That she's here with us in the group. That to have a group of designers. But yeah, we never had that exposure. Yeah. And yeah, any advice would be valuable.
So there's different ways to unpack that question. It's a really great question. I think that, you know, trade shows and the ones that you mentioned are world-class, incredible trade shows which will give you exposure to a variety of top tier buyers, whether it be larger retail organizations to very successful small independent boutiques. So I think you know, you need to determine how much what your production capacity is like. So if you are going to present your brand to many different buyers, you know, what does that look like in terms of how many different retailers would you be able to work with and satisfy demand? You might want to set a framework where everything is, and this happens quite often, where as a buyer, you're working with a maker who makes everything to order. And so you're you need to be very, very clear about what your lead time is like. So if you're at the Maison show usually it's January, February time period, and it takes you 6 months to produce goods and ship them out, then your materials that you provide the buyer with need to be very specific, so that you don't get into a situation where a buyer gives you an order and then it doesn't arrive when they're expecting it to arrive. So I think setting very clear expectations will set you up for success.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, and regarding the shipping, part, I don't know if anyone in this group or have you had that experience before. We are based in Kenya, and we do home decor or lighting with baobab pots. So now when the shipping time comes, the only channel that we have is DHL, or we have experience in the past. I don't know if in your experience and any like Power by People, how will you advise that part? Do you have any suggestion?
Yes, we do. Annie, do you want to answer that? Or?
Yeah, I can jump in there just and Fabiana, I can also talk to you offline after this, but we have a wonderful head of shipping and logistics based in Nairobi, Kenya, who can help to support should you be facilitating sales through Powered by People. And additionally, as part of kind of this learning platform and learning hub that we host, we are running 3 sessions next month on packaging and labeling. And our lead sales rep, our head of operations and shipping and logistics is also producing a webinar. So there is more in-depth content relating to kind of the nuts and bolts of shipping. So I can make sure that you have access to those webinars as they come up in the next few weeks. So we can kind of further help to define your strategy and your plan there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And Anka, I thought maybe we could go to that last slide, just some sort of action steps, because you kind of touched on this in your answer.
Absolutely. So I've just pulled together a number of questions for you to be able to ask yourselves in terms of, based on everything that I've outlined from a buyer's mindset, where are you in the journey of your own personal business's development? So, what size and type of retailer does your brand or suite of products appeal to? That will help define, what types of trade shows or marketplaces resonate the most with your type of product brand. How is your collection of products organized? Do you have enough variety within your collections to create different categories? Or if you are dealing with one category, let's say it's jewelry, do you have enough pieces within your collection, at least 10 plus styles, that have enough for a buyer to consider purchasing with you? Because oftentimes it is, there's a lot of different steps that come into play as to whether or not a buyer is going to engage with you. If you don't have a large enough collection, it might not necessarily be worth the lift on their end in terms of setting you up in their system and setting up payment terms and all of those sort of housekeeping things that they need to do. If they're dealing with makers and producers that have a greater variety, it's just easier to continuously engage because there's always something different, or there's more of a presentation that they can create in their stores based on you having more styles for them to present. And then another question that you can ask yourself, and we were just talking about this, but do you have the appropriate materials prepared to participate in a marketplace environment or an in-person trade show? And some of the organizational aspects of being able to do that is your collection up to date? So, are you going to feature your items on a marketplace when buyers are interested in purchasing, but if you don't have your latest and greatest updated collection, buyers might not necessarily be interested because they've already seen what you've presented in the past, or they might be upset that you're presenting something, but something else is waiting in the wings that they haven't had access to yet. Similarly with trade shows, buyers go to trade shows because they do want to see the latest and greatest and most updated collections. So if you're preparing for an upcoming trade show, you want to make sure that you have samples available to represent that. And then in terms of other materials, do you have accurate and consistent wholesale pricing, samples of each product, swatches of all the different variations that they come in? And then, for online, for marketplaces, do you have full product descriptions with all of the product details in terms of the materials that they're made of, the variations that they come in, the dimensions or sizing, particularly with marketplaces, because a buyer can't touch and feel and see it themselves. Those types of things become super, super critical in order for them to be able to buy with confidence. And layered into that is photography as well. And then the last question to ask yourself in terms of how you want to engage with different types of retailers is, do you have the capacity for private label or white label or customization? And if you do, that taps into a whole other subset of retailers that you might be able to do business with.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Those are really helpful prompts. We do have a few more questions. So Hebret, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, is asking, for a small brand, Do you suggest doing the trade shows, or would you recommend seeking an agent to help you? It's an interesting question.
Mhm.
And maybe Hubert, you could unmute yourself and kind of give us a little bit more information about your business specifically.
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I have a fashion brand, and I mean, it's at the moment it's fairly a small business. So I'm wondering, like, I know the trade shows are good, but how often do you have to attend them to get, you know, some kind for buyers to see that you're legitimate? Or is it better to, I know I know in the States that they have agents who take your product and show it to the buyers, but I believe they do ask for retainer fees and on top of their commission. So sometimes that for a small brand that could be, you know, quite high. So I just wanted to know from your opinion, in your opinion, like which is the best way for small brands to enter the market? Through trade show or agents?
Good question
It is
and a
great
hard one.
question.
Yeah.
It's a hard one without, I think if you're able to initially participate in person in a
Mhm.
trade show yourself, I think it's such a valuable learning experience, being able to deal directly with buyers themselves.
Mhm.
Alternatively, trade shows can be expensive to attend. So if you are able to find an agent that represents sort of collections that sit cohesively with yours, and you're confident that they can represent your brand well, then that is something to consider. It's a really tricky question. I think I would start like hyper local first and then grow from there. If there are in-person trade shows that you can attend that are local, I would start there. And then marketplace platforms, they enable you to be able to reach all sorts of amazing retailers quite seamlessly without geographically having to go anywhere. But you do need to have all of your information set up clearly, and photography is really, really key in that instance. So again, that's a consideration, because photography, not everyone is skilled at taking photographs themselves, and they have to be a certain level of quality. But if you do have access to a great photographer or have that skill yourself, I would recommend that route.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I have been in the business for quite a few years locally, and have been marketing locally, but I think I'm ready now to, venture out a bit and find a bigger market. So it's just like, yeah, just trying to,
So,
for starting out, which is the best way. So you would suggest doing the trade shows.
yeah, and if you have, if you know other small business owners who have had success with working with specific agents, I think that also speaks volumes, is just word of mouth. If you know other makers who yes, have had success going down that route, maybe start with talking to their agents, because you already have an inside perspective on how that agent does business.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. It's coming to the conclusion of this webinar, and Anke, thank you so very much for your time and your wisdom and guidance and mentorship here. It's an honor. And I just wanted to kind of put a few more calls to action out based on some of the questions that have come through. So at Powered by People, we do have a resource tab on our website for all makers to gain access to some other learning content, including Fabiana, a series of seminars on pricing for the wholesale market. So I can, if you want to send me an email, and I'll type in my email address here, I will make sure that you have access to those videos. And anyone who is interested, who might not already be in touch with our regional Kenyan sourcing and impact lead, whose name is Kimani, to onboard onto our platform, please feel free to email him. I've included his email in the chat here. So we welcome all of you to connect with us. And we do have a portion of our website, once you register onto our platform, that gives you access to these rolling webinars and seminars. And we also have all of your emails. So as we have new webinars to announce, you will receive rolling updates from us.